Okay, balik ta sa sugod guys kay para ka record ta ha. Oh, parang iba yung mga classmates makasulod man. Okay, sige. Welcome to our class, Splinting. Balik na sa sugodan. Okay, our splint is a rigid or flexible device. We can see here, rigid or flexible device. You look at your notes. Pag rigid po, the device is stiff. The device is stiff, meaning it is used mainly for stability. Kaya rigid siya. Kung flexible naman, meaning it is malleable, the device that we are using can contour, can shape rather to the contour of our body part. It is used for support. Devices po ang splint natin. Okay? So our splint can be used as a device. Sorry, can be externally applied. Stabilize man or support ang device natin. Mainly, this is to protect an injured part of our body. Okay, correct? Injured part of our body po ang pinaprotect natin. How do we do that? It is through immobilization. Kaya that is the main purpose of or the main benefit of our splint. Yung splint is used to immobilize in an optimal position. That way, we can protect our injured part of the body. Next, we have two splint types, dynamic and static. Pag dynamic po, functional siya kasi it assists with motion. Meaning there is motion involved pag dynamic ang splint mo. Okay, but how is the motion assisted? It is controlled motion lamang. Meaning the motion is still limited. But because there is motion, kaya tinawag siyang functional. Another type, we have static. Okay, static splint siya. It prevents motion. It restricts motion. It limits motion. Yan po ang static splint. Okay, let's go to the design categories. Let's start with serial static splint. Serial static. Static splint meaning it blocks one motion. Pero dahil serial siya, you can periodically alter it. Okay, isulat sa note, serial static splint. Serial, it can be periodically altered. But because static siya, it blocks one motion. Next, we have static motion blocking. Static motion blocking. Motion blocking meaning it blocks one motion. The name speaks for itself. But it allows movement in another direction kasi static siya, meaning static blocks motion towards one direction. Pero motion blocking siya. Okay, like this in the picture, it will allow you to do flexion, but it blocks extension. Next, we have static progressive splint. Static progressive splint. Kindly take note of static splint, meaning it will still block one motion. But because it is progressive, that motion blocking can be adjusted every 10 to 15 minutes. Highlight 10 to 15 minutes. Static progressive. Parang serial static siya, but the adjustment is every 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. Kay kung periodically altered siya, like every week, that's serial static. But if dasig ang progression, like every 10 to 15 minutes, that's static progressive. Another design category that we have is dynamic motion blocking. Dynamic motion blocking. Okay, for example, posterior flexor tendon repair or extensor tendon repair sa aton nga fingers. Okay, it allows certain motion kasi dynamic siya, meaning it allows certain motion, but it will also block others. How will it block others? No, it can be done through the use of elastic bands or elastic pulling. Dynamic motion blocking, meaning it will allow motion on both directions, but it will block completely one motion at a certain degree. Example po ito, picture. You have here the picture. It will block extension. It will block extension, But it will also allow extension. But to a certain degree, dun lang ang limitation ng extension. Tama? It blocks extension, but it also allows extension, but to a certain degree lamang. Kaya tinawag siyang dynamic motion blocking. And you see here, may elastic pulls. Okay, it controls the motion, kaya dynamic siya. Next, we have dynamic traction splint. Isulat sa notes, dynamic traction splint. It allows motion kasi dynamic siya. Allows motion, dynamic. The difference is it consistently applies traction. Kaya nga tinawag siyang traction splint. The name speaks for itself. Dynamic traction splint. It allows motion kasi nga dynamic but consistently applies traction. Kasi nga traction splint. Correct? All right, next we have tenodesis splint. Tenodesis splint. Can you recall what is the definition of tenodesis? Okay, your tenodesis is when you do wrist flexion, there is an extension moment. There is an extension moment in our fingers. When you say tenodesis, when you do wrist extension, there is a flexion moment in our fingers. That is tenodesis po. During extension, there is flexion moment in the fingers. And during wrist flexion, there is extension moment in the fingers. It tells you the relationship between the fingers and the wrist. That's tenodesis. Okay, so when we do tenodesis splint, the motion of the wrist will help us achieve different prehension patterns. Prehension, okay? The wrist will help us perform prehension patterns. When we say prehension, that is your thumb motion para maging functional yung thumb mo. So the tenodesis splint here, it facilitates the three-jaw chuck. Ang pag-hold ng ballpen, that's the three-jaw chuck. So again, your tenodesis splint will help us achieve prehension patterns. Another design category that we have is continuous passive motion orthosis. Continuous passive motion orthosis. What are these? Ito po yung mga machines or robots, no, electrically powered, that can help PROM or do passive range of motion in your limbs for a long period of time. So these are machines or robots that will help us, okay, move our joints. Pero passive motion lang siya. Continuous passive motion. Okay, again, continuous passive motion orthosis. These are electrically powered devices that provide PROM to our joints. Next, we have adaptive or functional orthosis. It promotes functional use of our hands. It promotes functional use of our hands, adaptive or functional orthosis. For example, you have the U cuff here. No, sa mga patients natin with SCI and they have absent hand or wrist function. So yung ginagawa, there's available orthosis to still help them become functional or adaptive to whatever their impairments are. Okay, so tinawag siyang adaptive functional orthosis because these are splint designs. These are splint designs that help us or it promotes functional use of our extremity. Okay, emphasis here on functional use. Kaya nga functional orthosis. Adaptive because it helps us adapt to whatever impairments the patients have. Okay, complications. What complications can arise from your from our use of the splints, no? Your splints, pag hindi ito na-disinfect and you do not clean your splints, possible na magka-dermatitis si patient. So it's your responsibility as a physical therapist to educate the patient on hygiene for the use of their splints. Tama? Okay, these are the complications. So what can you do to prevent these complications? So sa dermatitis, education on hygiene. Next, skin breakdown. Over bony prominences, if there is too much pressure from your orthosis, there can be skin breakdown. Okay, so to prevent that one, you put mga soft lining sa imo nga orthosis or splints. To prevent skin breakdown, what can you do? You don't apply too much pressure over sensitive areas. Next, we have compartment syndrome from too much external pressure. Compartment syndrome from too much external pressure. You can damage your nerves and blood vessels. Next, we have ischemia. Ischemia is reduced blood flow to the distal portion of our body due again to too much pressure from our orthosis or splints. Okay, ischemia, that is reduced blood flow to the distal portion due to too much pressure from our devices that we apply to the patient. Okay, we have here principles. Now, I want you to take note of our CMS. You always check CMS. C stands for circulation, isulat sa notes. M stands for motion, and S stands for sensation. You check the CMS. You always check for CMS, guys. If you're when you apply the device, you check the CMS of the distal portion. For example, nag-apply ka ng splint sa elbow mo, i-check mo ang CMS ng hand area. You check the CMS of the distal region. You check the circulation, the motion, and the sensation in the distal region. For circulation, it's capillary refill and pulses. So for example, nagbutang ka splint sa knee joint. Okay, meaning you check for capillary refill in the toes and the pulses in your ankle. Okay, this is our means of monitoring to prevent the complications of ischemia and, of course, compartment syndrome. Okay, another part of CMS is motion. Okay, so we check for motor function, and the last one is sense of touch or sensation, meaning we want to check the integrity of the proximal nerves or the distal nerves as well. Meaning ang nerves, okay, in nerve function, gina-maintain ta ang iya integrity. So that's why it's important to check CMS. So if you apply splint in the shoulder or in the hip, check the CMS of the fingers or of the toes. CMS again stands for circulation, motion, sensation. Okay, let's go to the splinting techniques. Number one here, we have the mallet finger splint. The mallet finger splint. Okay, mallet finger splint. Okay, can you put there in your notes? It promotes extension of the DIP. It promotes extension of the distal interphalangeal joint. Again, mallet finger splint, it promotes extension of the DIP. Okay, if you see here, now look at this. Mayara da siya area. It's a rigid type of static motion, a static splint, no? So that it can promote extension of the DIP. And kaya naka-flex na yan, kay grabe gid siya ka sturdy. Okay, let's proceed to the next. Okay, kindly take note of the picture. Look at the picture. Parang may 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ang may 5 kabuho sa kamot na. That's your mallet finger splint. Because in your quiz will be about will be naming or labeling the type of the name of the orthosis or splint. Okay, in your quiz, I will show you the picture of the splint and you will name the splint. Okay, so please take note of how it looks. Next, we have here oval 8. Okay, oval 8. Kindly take note of this one, oval 8. Your oval 8 splint is for finger conditions. Oval 8 splint is for finger conditions. Okay, it can be trigger finger sa PIP or DIP. It can be boutonniere deformity. It can be boutonniere deformity. Ay, boutonniere deformity, yes. We also have swan neck or the mallet finger or ang crooked finger or fractures of the finger, even trigger thumb. Okay, basta finger condition siya, you can use the oval 8 finger splint. Okay, kindly take note of the picture. Okay, take note of the picture. Ardo do ka oval 8 nandito siya. Oval 8 splint again is for finger conditions. Trigger finger, boutonniere, swan neck, mallet finger, even fractures of the finger. You use or you prescribe oval 8 splint. Oval 8 is a branded type of splint. Finger condition splint, oval 8. Okay, let's proceed. Body splint. Okay, body splint. Body, because the healthy finger will be used as the immobilizer to the damaged or injured finger. And then you tape them together. Again, body splint. Ito po kung ang isang finger is damaged and you use the healthy finger as the immobilizer. Okay, next, we have gutter splints. Okay, we have gutter splints. Okay, we have here gutter splints. It's used for fractures of the metacarpal and the phalanges. Gutter splint. Gutter na siya, kaya ang tsura yan. If you look at the picture, do may gutter. And the space there is where your finger will be placed. Gutter finger. Gutter splint, rather. And the gutter space is where your finger will be placed. Take note, gutter splints is used for fractures. Okay, of the finger, fractures of the finger, metacarpal or phalanges. Again, gutter splint na siya kay ang space or ang shape sang splint do gutter, kag ang space for the gutter is where your finger will be placed. Next, we have thumb spica, splint. Thumb spica, splint. Okay, look at the picture. Please take note of the picture there. Okay, it is used for two conditions, thumb strain, and DQT, decurvence stenosing tenosynovitis. Tama? Thumb spica splint, you prescribe it to patients with thumb strain and DQT or decurvence stenosing tenosynovitis. Okay, the MOI for your thumb strain and your DQT is flexion and adduction of the thumb. Overuse sa flexion and adduction. That's the MOI for your thumb strain and DQT, flexion and adduction. Your thumb spica will promote the opposite direction, abduction and extension. That is why this thumb spica, we prescribe it to our patients with thumb strain and DQT. Okay, look at the picture. Ito may circle siya nga gina-wrap around sa thumb area. Please take note. Okay, if you can understand the thumb spica, can you comment or can you chat in the chat area the two conditions where you prescribe thumb spica? What are the two conditions? I-comment mo, i-chat mo. What are the two conditions where we prescribe thumb spica splint? DQT and thumb strain. Very good. DQT and thumb strain. Okay, next. We have, okay, thank you very much. Yes, correct, DQT and thumb strain. Next, we have carpal tunnel splint. Carpal tunnel splint. Okay, you look at the picture, may puti siya tunga, tapos look at color yellow or brown. Tapos do wrap around siya sa my thumb area. Your carpal tunnel splint is a specific splint used for the condition, syempre. It speaks for itself, carpal tunnel syndrome. Your carpal tunnel syndrome, MOI, is flexion. Diba? Sa too much flexion, gaka-irritate or gaka-compress si median nerve sa aton wrist. So that's carpal tunnel. Your carpal tunnel splint will position your wrist optimally at slight extension. 0 to 5 degrees lang, slight extension. Okay, and that slight extension, which is 0 to 5 degrees extension, reduces the stress at the wrist, thereby relaxing your compression of the median nerve at the carpal tunnel. Okay, please take note of the picture once again. Okay, proceed tahan. Resting hand splint. Okay, take note of the picture. Ang picture may kamot. Okay, may kamot. Tapos, ano siya ho? If you notice this one, the hand is in a intrinsic plus position. Intrinsic plus position. Tama? Your thumb is in an intrinsic plus position. Isulat sa notes. Okay, what else? Ang diferensya from the carpal tunnel splint, no, ang iyang frame, rigid nga frame, pangalabot hasta sa fingers. The frame of the resting hand splint reaches the fingers. Yung carpal tunnel, it does not reach the fingers. Yung resting hand splint, it reaches the fingers. Okay, what are the three conditions where we can prescribe the resting hand splint? Isulat sa notes. Number 1, CVA patients. CVA patients. Number 2, those with ulnar nerve injury. Ulnar nerve injury. And number 3, patients nga nakadextrose or may IV line sa ilang wrist or sa ilang hand. Okay, can someone please comment that? The three conditions where we can prescribe the resting hand splint, CVA, ulnar nerve injury, and patients with IV line in their wrist, yung nakadextrose. Okay, commonly among those conditions, yung hand ay naka-intrinsic minus. So we want to prevent this deformity. We want to promote the intrinsic plus. That is why we prescribe the resting hand splint. This is used for prophylaxis. When we say prophylaxis, prevention of the intrinsic plus or intrinsic minus or claw hand deformity. We want to promote using the resting hand splint, the intrinsic plus position. Okay, last one for today. We have the SAM splint. The last one, you put there in your notes, the SAM splints. Okay, this SAM splints, this is moldable, stiff foam. Meaning pwede mo siya ma-mold and at a certain temperature, magiging stiff yan. You can mold it to the contour or the shape of the body part. Okay, at a certain temperature, you can stiffen it. So meaning it can accommodate different body parts. SAM splints. It is a moldable, stiff foam. So depende sa imo kung ano nga body part gamiton mo, nami siya kay moldable siya. Okay. Due to time limitations, guys, dili lang tanay asta. Okay? Sige. Any questions? Clarifications? Sa mga na lesson ta, we have 33 slides. We're at the 23rd already. But due to time constraints, dili lang tanay asta. I'll proceed with the lesson here on Monday naman. Okay, meaning yung quiz nyo sa Monday na rin. Okay, no questions. Very good, guys. For now, close your notes. Good man. We are done.
Thank you, sir.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
sir.